All right, let's just jump right into this explainer. We're looking at the Joseon Dynasty, roughly 5 centuries of Korean history that left us with literally some of the most stunning, thoughtfully designed spaces on Earth. But these aren't just pretty buildings to look at. They're actual physical manifestations of a deeply profound worldview. So let's unpack that.
Actually, let's start with a really fascinating puzzle. If you know Joseon history, you know Gyeongbokgung was the grand primary palace. It was bigger, more imposing, built first, the whole shebang. Yet, it was the secondary palace, Cheongdokgung, that snagged the UNESCO World Heritage status back in 1997. So, why on earth did a secondary structure get the ultimate global nod over the dynasty's main architectural crown jewel? To figure that out, we've got a great agenda today. We're hitting the Joseon Heritage Puzzle, Architecture Guided by Nature, the Palace of Living History, the Royal Tombs Collection, designing a sacred landscape, and finally, those incredible living traditions of worship. Starting with Section 1, the Joseon Heritage Puzzle, we really need to look at how Cheongdokgung completely flipped the script on accepted East Asian design norms.
So normally in standard East Asian palace design, think the Forbidden City or even Joseon's own Gyeongbokgung, everything is about projecting absolute authority. You've got this rigid, vertical, north-to-south axis. You literally walk a straight line through multiple gates just to reach the king. But Cheongdokgung, it breaks all those rules. It uses this brilliant horizontal west to east parallel layout instead.
Which brings us to Section 2, Architecture Guided by Nature. What actually drove this totally radical departure? Why ditch the classic blueprint of imperial power?
Well, it all comes down to Pungsu. It's a traditional Korean philosophy of geomancy, kind of like what we might call environmental design today. When the architects got to the site for Cheongdokgung, they were looking at this narrow, sloping piece of land. And instead of looking at it as an annoyance to just bulldoze and flatten into a grid, they embraced it. They wanted harmony, not domination.
So they ingeniously worked within natural topography. They still made sure the individual building units faced south, that was a non-negotiable, but they combined them in this horizontal west to east layout. You start with the Injeongjeon, the main hall over on the west. Move to the middle, you hit the Senjeongjeon, the royal council. Keep going east, and there's the Daejeojeon, the bedchamber. By sort of stepping the buildings across the landscape, they didn't have to clear-cut anything. They actually kept a massive indigenous forest intact, the famous Huon Rear Garden, instead of walling the whole place off with artificial blockades.
Moving to Section 3, the Palace of Living History. Because all of this brilliantly shows why Cheongdokgung isn't just some architectural marvel. It is a perfectly preserved time capsule.
And the craziest part? We aren't just guessing about how it looked or functioned back then. We can verify the absolute authenticity of these structures today because the historical records are just insane. We have the Donggol-do, which is this highly detailed 19th century painting. We've got the Donggol-do-leong layout drawings from the early 20th century. There's the Gyeonggolji detailing the history of every single building. And, maybe most importantly, the Ugwe, these massive records that documented literally every nail, every piece of wood, and exactly how state events were run.
But here is the real historical twist that answers our initial puzzle. Back during the Japanese invasion in the late 16th century, the Grand Main Palace, Gyeongbokgung, was completely burnt to the ground, gone. And it actually sat there in ruins for over 270 years. Because of that, Cheongdokgung, the secondary palace, had to step up. It became the de facto main palace, the primary stage for state rights, and ultimately the longest-standing royal residence of the entire Joseon dynasty. It is quite literally the living history of the empire.
All right, Section 4, the Royal Tombs Collection. Let's shift gears from the palaces of the living to the palaces of the dead.
40. That staggering number represents the royal tombs scattered across 18 different locations that make up this incredible serial World Heritage property. I mean, for a single dynasty to last 500 years is rare enough on its own. But for the tombs of its rulers to remain intact, perfectly preserved across a massive, rapidly expanding modern metropolis like the greater Seoul area, that is absolutely mind-blowing.
Now, not every single royal grave made the World Heritage List. It all came down to a very strict Confucian hierarchy. Down at the bottom, you have the Myo rank for concubines and other royal family. In the middle, the Wan for crown princes and birth parents. But the absolute highest rank, the Nung, was reserved exclusively for kings, queens, and posthumous kings. It's those 40 specific Nung tombs that secured that outstanding universal value designation.
Which leads us to Section 5, designing a sacred landscape. Because just like the palaces, creating these resting places took a masterful, deeply intentional blend of nature and architecture. If we were actually walking through these sacred grounds together right now, we'd move sequentially through 3 distinct zones. First, step 1, you enter the secular entrance area. You pass a red spiked gate and cross over a forbidden stream, which symbolically washes away the everyday world. Then, step 2, you're in the ceremonial area, centered right around this unique T-shaped shrine called a Jengjagak.
And finally, step 3, you head up the slope to the burial area. This is the sacred, highly protected space of the dead, centered on the burial mound itself.
And bringing it right back to those principles of Pungsu we talked about earlier, every single tomb's location was painstakingly selected. They didn't just pick a spot at random. A tomb absolutely had to be backed by a Jusan, or guardian hill. It had to face a distant mountain in the front to get that optimal height difference. They tested for rich soil, ensured perfect water drainage, and deliberately separated it all from the secular world with a propitious stream. It is environmental balance down to an absolute science.
Finally, section 6, living traditions of worship. Because what makes these spaces truly unique, what really sets them apart from, say, the pyramids of Egypt or Roman ruins, is what's happening inside them right now, today.
The World Heritage Committee actually hit the nail on the head here. These royal tombs earned their status under Criterion VI, which means they aren't just beautiful dead ruins. They are directly associated with a living tradition of ancestral worship. They are active, breathing cultural ecosystems.
This brings us to Gil-Ari, the auspicious ancestral rites. Every single year, on the exact anniversary of a monarch's death, their descendants and specific worshipping societies spend days preparing. They ritually cleanse their minds and bodies, they prepare foods based on centuries-old manuals, and they perform the exact same 600-year-old Confucian rituals. They are literally honoring the physical soul of their ancestors in the very same T-shaped shrines built hundreds of years ago. It genuinely gives you goosebumps just thinking about it. So to wrap this up, I want to leave you with something to ponder. In our incredibly fast-paced, modernizing world, how many societies out there can claim an unbroken, 500-year-old physical and spiritual communion with their ancestors' architecture? The real hidden genius of Joseon isn't just in how they arranged stones or saved a forest. It's in the unparalleled value of preserving the living traditions that give those stones their meaning today. Thanks for hanging out and exploring the brilliance of the Joseon dynasty with me.